The Enlightenment is one of the most interesting and frequently studied periods of time. As a quick refresher, the Enlightenment was a period of time that spanned most of the 1700s, where philosophical, political, and scientific inclinations shifted away from the religious to the measurable. From the unexplainable to the explainable, it was a time of unrivaled progress, and today we're going to look at one of the most fantastical moments in the Enlightenment, and how it may have ushered in a brand new age. My name is Josh, and this is the last episode of All the People You Should Know. Hey everybody, thank you so much for listening. Sorry about that little trick there in the middle. This is not really the last episode I'm ever going to do. It is just simply the last episode under the title, All the People You Should Know. As of 6/7/2021, this show will appear as Obscure History on your podcast feed. Remember, you don't have to do anything. It's just a new look, a new release schedule, and a slightly wider variety of history that you should know about, but probably don't. Okay, I'll shut up now, and I'll save the rest of my housekeeping announcements for the very end of this episode. Now, normally I love to follow a formula. I like to lead with some context and slowly reveal the subject of the episode to you as we go. I feel like that really helps us connect to the people and events that are sometimes very old and perhaps even difficult for us to relate to. However, this episode is going to be just slightly different because I'm jumping right into the biography portion here in the beginning, and then at the end we're going to talk about some very, very interesting context. Luigi Galvani was born in Bologna in 1737 to a family that, by today's standards, would probably be considered middle class. His father was a goldsmith, and his family had the opportunity to send one of their children to further their education. They chose Luigi. Originally, Luigi wanted to join the church and become a priest, but after his family dissuaded him from joining the clergy, he enrolled at the University of Bologna to study medicine and philosophy. After graduating with degrees in both areas in 1759, Galvani applied to be a lecturer at the university. By 1762, he had become a prominent anatomist and spent his time there establishing himself as a very valuable medical scientist. In 1776, he was appointed by the Academy of Sciences to administer practical teaching of anatomy, and this opportunity allowed him to begin human dissection. And this experience greatly influenced his later work. As an appointed member of the Academy of Sciences, Galvani was required to publish research work each year and then often defend his findings in public debate. During this time, Galvani began experimenting with medical electricity, which was sort of a new technology for him to work with. During a dissection of a frog, Galvani, with the assistance of his wife, touched the sciatic nerve of the frog with a metal tool that had been charged with electricity. The shock administered to the nerve elicited a response from the muscles, and thus, Galvani's theory of animal electricity came to be. In the introduction to their book, The Ambiguous Frog, the Galvani-Volta Controversy on Animal Electricity, Marcello Pera and Jonathan Mandelbaum describe this instance in a very colorful yet informative way. They say, "Once upon a time there was a frog. It fell into the hands of a doctor, was sacrificed in the name of science, and was prepared in the usual manner, as that doctor and others with him were used to doing with animals of its species. Those who have forgotten what that manner was can look up the doctor's writing. The hapless frogs were cut transversely below their upper limbs, skinned, disemboweled. Only their lower limbs were left joined together, containing just their long crural nerves. That day, unbeknownst to the doctor, the frog positioned itself so that its residual extremities, nerve, and muscle touched a metal. This caused it to feel a shock all down its body, but as the creature was unable to sigh, despite its undoubted intention of doing so, it drew the doctor's attention by starting to contract. The doctor nearly exclaimed it a miracle, for no dissected frog had ever been observed to move all by itself. Though colorful, the most important aspect of that telling is when Pera and Mandelbaum note that the doctor nearly exclaimed it a miracle. This is of critical importance not only to the development of neuroscience and the understanding of the natural world, but also to the Enlightenment as a movement. Prior to Galvani's discovery, theories about animal spirits, humors, and unseen forces that moved life forms dominated the fields of the natural sciences. Galvani presenting a tangible, reproducible, and knowable source of animation was highly controversial. But it sparked people's interests, and their study and academic criticism, which eventually led to the creation of electrophysiology as a field of its own. Galvani's discovery of animal electricity forced the scientific community to question exactly what inspires life and movement. Historian Marco Piccolino notes of this time, Galvani's work swept away from life sciences mysterious fluids and elusive entities like animal spirits and led to the foundation of a new science, electrophysiology. 2 centuries of research of work have demonstrated Galvani's insightful conception of animal electricity. Today we know electrophysiology as neurology, or the study of nerves. Before Luigi Galvani's accidental discovery and the lifetime of work he put in to prove his theories, people didn't really know what nerves were. Don't get me wrong, before the Enlightenment, many advancements were made in the field of neurology. The people who made these advancements just didn't know the exact science behind what they were doing. Here are some of the most notable pre-Enlightenment neurological developments, and these are in a loose chronology. I say loose because I know for sure that the first 2 are out of order, but the rest of them I think are pretty close. The Inca developed a practice called trepanning, which is a procedure that allowed a practitioner to drill a hole in a patient's skull to relieve pressure from traumatic head injury. The ancient Egyptians wrote a treatise concerning trauma surgery, which contains descriptions of neurological conditions, though they did not really understand the nature of those conditions. The Sumerians illustrated physical ailments being caused by injury to the brain. In 1549, Dutch physiologist Jason Pratensis published a book on neurology called De Cerebri Morbis, which was devoted to neurological diseases and symptoms. This book leaned heavily on the words of Galen and Hippocrates, and though it didn't describe any new ailments or treatments, it was significant in that it was the first work to compile knowledge from many sources that specifically focused on neurology. Thomas Willis in 1664 and 1667 published The Anatomy of the Brain and Cerebral Pathology, respectively. These books revolutionized the field of neurology and laid much of the foundation for the field's development. And finally, morbid anatomists began the development of color printing of detailed anatomical illustrations. Specifically, Matthew Bale and Jean Krulheier illustrated the effect of the brain's physiology on the trauma of a stroke. Building off of the works of the likes of René Descartes, John Locke, and David Hume, the Enlightenment was a time of explosive development. Many Enlightenment thinkers had backgrounds in the sciences, and although the Enlightenment is most often associated with its influence on politics and philosophy, it was also a critical time for the advancements of physical sciences like medicine. The cultural decentralization from religious ideology allowed medicine to develop in ways that it hadn't been able to develop before. On the subject, historian Gunter B. Rise notes, among the most prominent beliefs operative during the Enlightenment was faith in the progress and perfectibility of society with the help of science and technology. On the methodological front, the power of reason, variously interpreted as mathematical or deductive or sensualist, inductive, characterized the debates concerning human understanding. A rejection of previous theological hierarchies and social constraints was initiated by Enlightenment thinkers under the banner of a desirable, natural evolution of the innate intellectual and moral tendencies of man. Finally, the condition of liberty as a right for attainment of happiness and fulfillment was coupled with the principle of unity, a greater benefits for the greatest number. Both constituted the fundamental pillars for the envisioned reconstruction of human institutions. In health-related fields, the Enlightenment established a much more optimistic outlook concerning the role and benefits of medicine. In their quest towards progress, most contemporary thinkers believed that health was a natural state of the body which could be maintained and protected. In turn, they were confident that eventually all disease could be eradicated. Galvani's frogs inspired more than just scientific research. In fact, in the introduction to her 1831 printing of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley credits Galvani's work as an inspiration for the book. She says, "Perhaps a corpse would be reanimated. Galvanism has given token of such things. Perhaps the component parts of a creature might be manufactured, brought together, and endued with a vital warmth." Galvani's work, built out of and fully embodying the Enlightenment, served as the primary inspiration behind one of literature's most influential novels. This fact is much more important and interesting when considering that Frankenstein is considered a work of the Romantic era, not the Enlightenment. And in stark contrast to the Enlightenment, the Romantic period reverted back to emphasizing the less tangible. It represented the pursuit of the common human experience. It had a focus on the five senses and this awe of the unknowable and the preservation of the natural. One of the most prominent themes in Frankenstein that was also directly reflected in society at the time was the notion that there is a danger in knowing too much and pushing science too far. Where Galvani and his rival Volta spent their lives trying their best to see and measure the invisible force which inspires muscles and bodies to move and gives the spark of life, the Romantic period biologist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck strongly stated, "Living beings have specific characteristics which cannot be reduced to those possessed by physical bodies." Galvani's work can be used as a landmark. It represents the precipice of Enlightenment thought. On one side, it symbolically represents the deepest and most fundamental characteristics of the Enlightenment, demystifying the invisible, understanding the natural world wholly, and divorcing science from supernatural constraints. On the other, it was greatly influential in swaying public opinion by inspiring Frankenstein. Away from those same Enlightenment ideals, it pushed society and academia to consider the role of scientists in the world and the importance of the unknowable. If not chronologically, then symbolically, Galvani's work represents the transition from one period to another. It shows not only our potential for progress, but also our resistance to change and our fear of uncovering the great unknown. All right, guys, I know that this was a short one. I'm super sorry. This is finals week of the biggest term I have ever had in my life. So I am just thankful that I was able to even get this out. Luigi Galvani is a very interesting guy, and I would love to get into his story just a little bit deeper. His legacy is absolutely insane. There's a crater on the moon named after him. Galvanism, galvanizing metal, that whole process is named after him because of how prominent of a scientist he was and how well respected he is in the scientific community. He also, weirdly, so I say that he's this champion of the Enlightenment, and I think that he totally is, but he also proselytized Christianity after every experiment that he did in this weird way where he'd be like, I can make the frogs dance using invisible forces, but also you should believe in Jesus, which is fine. I think that's an interesting approach. But for a guy who was sort of fully enveloping the Enlightenment, which is sort of known for its sort of distancing from the supernatural to, be simultaneously the pinnacle of the Enlightenment and also, deeply devoted to Christianity is sort of a fun little paradox, but, he's a very interesting guy. And I really do appreciate you guys for listening. Like I said, I'm so sorry. This is literally, as I am saying this right now, the last week of probably, I mean, I've got a couple classes to take this summer, but basically the last term that I've got like my undergraduate like capstone project that is due in like 5 days, and it is killing me. So I thank you for your patience while I finish up these last hectic weeks. And like I said, tune in 6/7/2021. It's going to look different in your podcast feed. It's going to have a different name, but it's going to be me. I'm going to be saying the same kinds of things, just more often and with a little wider variety. If you want to keep up with what I'm working on, you can go to Instagram at Obscure History Pod, and that's going to be the primary social media account for now. I'm going to also continue posting on at All the People Pod on the different things as well for a while, just until everybody that wants to come over to the new accounts can. I really hate social media in all of its forms and facets, so I just even switching over one account is just the biggest burden on my mind. So anyways, guys, I am so excited to show you our indie music feature today. Today we've got Preacher Sneakers with their brand new song, I Hate This Bed, and these guys are so awesome. And they also recently got engaged, so congrats you two, you are awesome, and I wish you all the happiness in the world. Marriage is one of the very best parts about being a human. I don't really give advice because frankly I'm terrible at it, but here's one of the only pieces of advice that I actually give people for real. Okay, here it is. When you guys are at your wedding, you're having a blast, you're talking to the people that showed up to like shower you with love and well wishes, you have to make sure that you eat. I am so dead serious. My wife and I totally forgot to eat during our ceremony, and the first thing we were thinking about when we left for our honeymoon was how crazy hungry we were. And this seems to be true of most weddings. My wife is a professional photographer, and sometimes I help her shoot weddings, and I always like to watch to see if the bride and groom actually sit down to eat. And I'm gonna say that most of the time they do not. So have a happy life. Choose love when being annoyed is easier, and make sure that you sit down and scarf on some grub during your big day. Everyone else, have a nice week.
And took your sleeping meds, but I can't turn it off like you. I really tried my best, turn my phone off like the rest, but I can't turn it off like you. I just lay here and wait for something, but nothing comes. I lay wide awake for nothing, will something come? I haven't shapes or the road or an ending, or an ending.